Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Production channel here at YouTube, and welcome to another album of the week. This is episode number 99, and for this week's pick goes to one of my favorite albums from these guys. It is the third full-length album from the modern-day Swedish hard rock / heavy metal band. It is Highway Pirates from Bullet, which was released through Black Lodge Records on February 4th, 2011, and since a few weeks ago was already February 4th, that means it's already reached its 10th anniversary. So 10 years for this album. So again, this is the third album from these guys. It is also the second album for the bass player Adam Hector, who again debuted on the previous album from 2008 that was Bite the Bullet. So this lineup right here definitely continued into this album. So Highway Pirates. And if I was to tell you one of my favorite albums from Bullet, still, I will definitely tell you it is the most recent album still, Dust to Gold. But Highway Pirates is definitely up there. I mean, I've already spotlighted Full Pull, which is also up there as one of my favorite albums from these guys. But Highway Pirates is not too far behind. This is just a solid album. So, again, this was their third full-length album, though, at this point. And just great. I mean, they debuted in 2001. They released their very first single in 2002, which was titled Heavy Metal Highway. And then they followed it a year later with the Speeding in the Night EP. Then finally debuting on Black Lodge Records in 2006 with their debut full-length album, Heading for the Top, which did feature the song that introduced me to this band in the first place. That was the title track, Heading for the Top. So I pretty much, again, I got into these guys right when they were still relatively new. But so pretty much I had followed these guys for many years, so, and I still follow them. Just again, these guys really grew into being one of my favorite bands for sure of in modern day. Just I don't want to talk too much about at least my how these guys are definitely dear to my heart in some ways when it comes to modern bands. But I'll definitely digress. So, Highway Pirates, again, following 2008's Bite the Bullet. A few years, of course, at least 2 years, them touring for that album. Even at one point opening up for AC/DC in Sweden. Or at least during the Scandinavian tour they actually did. And that right there had to have been an honor. Because again, I know many people will make comparisons between Bullet and AC/DC. They have a similar sound, but they definitely were more at times really close to, let's say, the likes of either Accept or Saxon. At times even a little bit of like Thin Lizzy in there. I mean, if I was to really mark down any sort of comparisons, Bullet is basically what happens if Thin Lizzy, AC/DC, and Accept all had a child, basically. And I mean, of course, I'll make some comparisons to Nazareth here and there. I mean, Hellhofer, I made the comparison that even Hellhofer and the band actually used as a quote when they were sharing my review of Dust to Gold on their Facebook page, where I basically said that Hellhofer was like the fucking love child of Dan McCafferty and Udo Dirkschneider. That was kind of the comparison. That was the analogy I made when just summing up Hellhofer's voice, and I still to this day is just embedded in my brain. I'm still gonna hold that memory to the day I die. Just a very, very cool thing that was the quote that they chose for that. And of course I had every intention on making that comparison, but they fucking took it and they put it up there. It was awesome. So yeah, it should tell you that I'm just a big fan of these guys. So again, they toured for at least Bite the Bullet, and then sometime at least in 2010, beginning of the 2010s, they go. Of course, I can't look up the information on what studio they were booked in. I even looked through the booklet, I looked through everything, and I can't find any information on what studio they were booked in to record this. They could have recorded this at their own personal home studio, which I think most bands these days do anyways into the modern day, is basically record at their home. So if you got the right equipment and got the right space in your home and the right room, you can be able to at least to capture a really good sound. So I think that's what with modern technology like Pro Tools or WavePad or Audacity, and again with all the microphones you can see online and all the stuff, you pretty much how you can pretty much can create your own home studio. So I think if anything, Bullet must record this at their own home personal studio, which again, cheap in some ways, cheaper than I think booking, because of again, it costs more money I think to actually to record at a studio than it is at home. It's like, well, it is going to cost quite a bit to record at home, but you'll still have tons of time to actually work on stuff than actually going into a studio, because of then you have to book for time, which then the money then costs a little bit even more. So yeah, I can almost see this might have been recorded at their own home personal studio, but it sounds fantastic. So really, the results are just easily going to be as good as anything as recording from a studio. So it's just great. Who knows? They must have recorded this at a studio, but again, sometimes people, I guess, don't feel like throwing that kind of information. So it's really, so it's kind of up in the air for me. So right now, that's all I can look up and find. So let's definitely move on. So whatever day or month they must have recorded this, it must have at least sometime been within at least the summer or even fall to at least winter of 2010, because of then if eventually it would be released through Black Lodge Records on February 4th. So all the mixing and all that was definitely finished. But so that's about there. As far as also, I definitely should bring up some other facts that the legendary Biff Byford of Saxon actually does provide some sort of stuff to this album. Actually, his famous whistle. And I'll definitely get to that track where he definitely provides his famous whistle, which for sure definitely left me and my dad's hearing ears ringing for days after I had taken my dad to see Saxon with another friend or so in Reno back in 2015. that was a blast of a show anyways. So let's definitely move on though. So let's just get into the album from Bullet. Let's get into Highway Pirates. For this album, we do have about 10 songs here, and it pretty much all clocks in at 39 minutes and 8 seconds. However, if you were able to get the let me kind of bring it up. If you were able to get at least the Japanese CD pressing of this album, it would contain a extra track called Wild Wild Woman. So I'll definitely get into that. Though apparently there's no good timing for how much, but somewhere it had to be close to 40 minutes or so. I think it would get bumped up to. But let's definitely let's run through the tracks here. Let's run through a lot of the track listing here, all the songs, all these 10 songs here. Let's definitely run through these. So we begin with Highway Pirates, Back on the Road, Stay Wild, Blood Run Hot, Fire and Dynamite, Down and Out, Knuckle Duster, Heavy Metal Dynamite, City Lights, and then finally Into the Night. So I guess we have 2 songs here with the word dynamite on here. Though I guess it's more of a change than having every song with the word rock in it, which is cliched, I guess. So there you go. But of course, if you had the Japanese copy, Wild Wild Woman would be the 11th song. So there you go. So let's get into some of the songs here. I mean, again, if you're familiar with Bullet's sound and their just their style, again, what I ended up mentioning earlier in this video on summoning up Bullet's sound, it's basically almost what happens if Thin Lizzy decide to have a let's say love child with bands like Accept and AC/DC, or even in some cases Saxon or Nazareth. That's kind of the feel you get here. This one I think really takes on more of a Saxon or Crocus sound to it than akin to like either AC/DC or Accept. So it has more of a new wave or British heavy metal feel to this album than compared to the previous two albums, being Heading for the Top and Bite the Bullet, which Bite the Bullet had really big AC/DC and Accept characters to that album. This one, again, it really follows more like a classic new wave or British heavy metal sound to it. Again, not very too far off from like either Saxon, like what comes to mind, either being, for example, Strong Arm of the Law or Denim and Leather. You get that. Or when it comes to Crocus, I really think of albums like Hardware or One Vice at a Time. Or even here and there, a little bit of Headhunter. So you get a little bit of that classic feel to here, but you get some of those classic very dual guitar, twin guitar attack feel that bands like Thin Lizzy also had for sure in their time. So you get plenty of that kind of characteristic, but again, applied to here, it's just straight up greasy, no bullshit, hard rock / heavy metal. Just everything on here. You as far as when it comes to hooks and overall writing and just the overall feel and the jams of some of these songs, everything just ends up really popping out. It just has a lot of gusto to this album. It's really it's definitely one of their best albums. I mean, when I first got into Bullet in 2008 and hearing Heading for the Top, they almost seemed very kind of, I don't want to use it in a bad way, but in some cases, some really thought of them as almost like, again, just your typical retro band who were definitely trying to sound a lot like their heroes. It definitely seemed almost, again, playing a lot more off the cliches in their earlier day on that album. It just seems very, the whole feel, it just feels more tongue-in-cheek, I guess you can say, on their first album. But it seems like with each album, they just progressed even more. And this one, I think they really just hit their stride where you can tell they're starting to take things more serious, even though, again, they still got some fun lyrics. But that's the whole point. It's rock and roll. It's not supposed to be rocket science. Again, you're not going to, expect anything that's going to be so deep meaning. That's supposed to make everyone feel like you're intelligent of some sort. Like, I have to be treated a little more like an adult. Fuck that. That's not the point of this. The point of this is just to have fun, like it was in the early days. Again, it's the whole point. It's rock and roll. Again, the whole idea is basically just to put on these kind of tunes, crank them in your car, and roll the window down, and just let the fucking wind blowing through your hair. That's the whole point of some of this. But at the same time, it's just the precise musicianship is what seems to be here. It's a lot more tighter here. You really can just hear that the band is just having balls of fun, but still feels very precise. Everything is just honed down. It's just, again, this is just a great example of a great modern day rock and roll album. It's just, again, through and through. All of it. It's purely classic with modern day technology in some cases, the way it was recorded, but it still has that classic feel to it, where you could have threw this album back into a time machine in 1981, and many people wouldn't have thought any different. Again, it just fits with that era. The guitar tones, it's just classic. That's the whole point. But at the same time, there's at least a part of the sound here where they really are taking things even further. They're expanding on it. They definitely mean every bit of what they play on here. That's, again, it's one of the things that I really take away from that I really look at this album. It's why it pops out a lot at me most of the time. It's just, again, a great overall feel. It's just, again, it's one of the most top-notch albums from these guys. They really were. This is the album I think they really started to hit their stride here, and then eventually just completely perfected with Dust to Gold. This is the beginning of the more class. This, again, just Bullet really hitting their stride as as just a band, where it's no longer being retro. This is basically what they are. They basically are the embodiment of what many people seem to consider retro, because they play it with so much heart. Which again, a lot of bands they can try and sound all classic as they want, but some bands today, very few can really just can possess that knack for that kind of writing, and where it goes beyond just being retro. These guys are the embodiment, and that's where I think it's the best example. They're not just retro. They literally love this sound, that it's pretty much a part of their soul. So that's the kind of the best way I can at least sum it up. But as far as songs, I mean, since I mentioned that Biff Byford actually, again, provides his famous whistle on this album, it's on the very first track, which is the title track. He actually, again, he provides it in there, and just a great track, too. It's a barn burner. Just great stuff, but there's just plenty of great songs on here. I mean, I love songs like Stay Wild, Fire and Dynamite, Down and Out, Knuckle Duster, Heavy Metal Dynamite, and of course Into the Night. I just love these songs. Stay Wild to me always kind of sounds more like an Airborne kind of track, though. Again, instead of sounding like typical AC/DC, it just sounds more like Airborne. Again, that's another band that many people try to really compare a lot to AC/DC. I mean, yeah, they do kind of have that sound, but here, to me, I feel like they kind of came up with their own sort of formula, in a way. So that's the way I look, and the thing is, the kind of formula that they created, I think, was more upbeat and more energetic than compared, and they have their own characteristics. And I think Bullet kind of made a track here with Stay Wild that I think wouldn't have been too far out of place on, let's say, like Armed and Dangerous or Running Wild. It's got that same feel to it. It's a great track. Same goes for Back on the Road. Same sort of attack here and approach. So it's, again, they're both fun rockers. I love these. I especially love the live version of Stay Wild on the Bullet live album from 2019, which is still one of my, that right there, of any other modern day heavy metal band that plays that classic sound, I think Bullet made one of the best live albums of some of these bands, because that just has a lot of just again, some of these songs sound great in the studio here, but when they're just played live, there's just an overall a rule of energy that just doesn't seem to be captured in any studio version. But that's just me. I know a lot of people, of course, there are a lot of people that really love live albums. I think Bullet did a great live album too, and again, double live. You can't get any better than that. So I think Stay Wild just sounds fantastic in a live setting. Most of these songs do. I wish they did put in some more songs from this album on that live album, but still, what we're given, I think, was still a solid enough live album that can be seen as a great introduction to even Bullet themselves. So just great. But again, Stay Wild, just a great track. So me trying to pick down any sort of some of these songs is can almost feel very exhausting, because again, I just love these songs all. Again, I just love these. I love also Into the Night, which is a great way to end the album. It ends the way the album even opened up. I mean, with Highway Pirates, I mean, you got great opening song and a bookend song. It's fucking great. There's just so many. There's just, again, at times it can be melodic. That's one other thing about this album. It can be melodic, but it also can be very heavy at the same time. It really is the first time where they definitely started to really hone in their writing and hone in their approach to just songwriting and composing and putting together a album. Again, the construction, it's all here. It's a bona fide classic, and it took me years to actually appreciate this. Because again, at the first time I heard it, it didn't hit me as much, but over time, I just become to love this album. I know that can be seen as almost a knock, but that really isn't. It's just that I finally became to really appreciate it, to the point where I love this album and rake it up there as one of my favorite albums from Bullet. So, and again, I've talked a lot about this album already, so I'm definitely just gonna kind of leave it here. Again, this was just a classic record with plenty of just great songs, memorable writing, and just hooks, which again, Bullet really started to get into the into that sort of mind frame of just really come up with some great hooks. I think with each album, it's got plenty of hooks on most of their albums. Some albums are not as nearly as hook-laden as they should be, but still, there's still something there that just makes those songs still great. Again, this album, along with Dust to Gold, I think are up there as definitely some of the best albums from these guys. So there you go, Highway Pirates. After this album, though, this lineup of Bullet would at least last up until Full Pull. Highway Pirates, I definitely should mention, would also be the final album on Black Lodge Records, because after this, they would then get signed with Nuclear Blast, and that began with 2012's Full Pull, then ended with 2014's Storm of Blades. So they lasted that, and to this day, they are now with Steamhammer, which that began with 2018's Dust to Gold, then 2019's Bullet Live. So right now they're still with Steamhammer, but again, this was their final album on Black Lodge Records, and then again up until Full Pull. After that album, guitar player Eric Armstrong, I hope I pronounce his name correctly, who had been in the band since 2001, would eventually leave after Full Pull and would then be later replaced by Alexander Libro, who has been in the band since 2013, so debuting on 2014's Storm of Blades. So he's been in the band for then, and of course Adam Hector would leave the band after Storm of Blades, and he eventually would get replaced by Gustav Hector, who would debut on 2018's Dust to Gold. And so again, lineup changes over time, but again, still nonetheless, what we were left here was just a great album, and this was a good album, and in many ways can be seen as like an end of an era album, because this was again the transition from the more their hungrier years, where they definitely were trying to be a band that wants to play classic stuff because they were getting tired, I guess, of all the things that was so modern in the early 2000s. But then being here to actually being a band that wants to be a serious rock and roll band. To me, I know as much as I also love like a band like Airborne, I really do have to consider Bullet probably be the greatest rock and roll band here in the modern times, because I think right now they are becoming the embodiment of what a rock and roll band is. I think that's why I think I consider Bullet to be one of the best rock bands in general here in the modern times. It just hooks, the overall quality of the writing, just the the whole entire package. They just have it. And that's why I think each album, they don't really lose a step. They're the most consistent band. Same thing can be seen with Airborne, I feel, as well. But I think Bullet might be more consistent. And I don't want to completely say anything bad about any of these bands. But again, if I have to be at least very honest, Bullet, I feel, is the most consistent. There's even with an album like Full Pull, which was kind of a very different almost sounding album, because it was more laid back. It really took on more of a late 70s, early 80s sort of sound to it, where it really was kind of capturing that sort of period in time, but still did it in a good job and sounded raw for at least 2012. But after that, again, albums just got heavy, and they still crank out stuff, or even you can consider Bullet the Swedish Accept. But goddamn, nothing bad here. I love these guys, so there you go. Again, this album reached its 10th anniversary on February 4th. So if there's any of you that have been following Bullet just as much as I have been, and if this album does rank among one of your favorites, definitely leave all of those thoughts in the comment section below. But if you haven't even heard Bullet, I can't see this album not being a great introduction. I can't see any of you who likes this good modern day classic sounding hard rock / heavy metal, not liking this album. It's a great album, but if I really was going to point you in a great direction to get into Bullet, I think Bullet Live would be a good starting point too. But Our Pirates, this album is just classic from beginning to end. It's a modern day classic. So there you go. Next week, well, a particular Judas Priest's album will be hitting its 40th anniversary. And yes, I'm going to be finally talking about that album. But that's until next week. So with that, I hope all of you enjoyed. This is Every Thrasher Sam out, and I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.